I'll just put this down. Very good morning to you all, Mr. Agarwal, Mehtaji, Mr. Chug, and all the friends and colleagues on the dais and in the audience. It's my pleasure to be here and to be speaking on a theme which is extremely important and stimulating to my mind. The transformative reforms in the power sector is what Anu spoke about, the transformation going in the economy and our ambition of $5 trillion economy by 24-25. And we've also been speaking about the $10 trillion economy goal by early 2030s. The energy and the power sector will play an extremely important role in that. And that is, to my mind, is what sets the context for my address today. As I see in the energy sector, electricity is part of that. There are two major transformations which are currently undergoing in the world. One transformation is in the energy sector itself. We have had the days of coal, we have had oil, gas, basically used as heat to generate power or energy. Increasingly in last many decades and more now, the form in which the energy is being used increasingly by the society and the world is in the form of electricity. So the transition which is and transformation which is going in the energy space of more and more energy being generated and used in the form of electricity is, to my mind, a very big and fundamental transformation which is going on, and I would dwell a little bit on that. So that is my first sort of take, that big transformation in energy with electricity at the core or the center of it. And how do we enable this transition to happen in the country is my first part of the theme today. The second major transformation which I see going through in the energy and especially in the power sector is the transformation from a vertically integrated, state-owned, largely publicly delivered kind of energy sector structure to a largely private sector structure where generation, transmission, and the distribution of electricity in the power sector is going to be or has been moving towards the private sector. That is another transformation to my mind which is extremely significant. And if we can get that right, if we can enable that to happen, possibly that will contribute much more to our goals of prosperity, economic growth, and otherwise. So this is the second transformation to my mind, where the private sector is at the center of and should be at the center of the entire energy, especially the electricity industry. So I would speak about these two major transformations and at the end try to relate somewhat to the audience here, which is basically in the electrical and the electronics industry here. The first transformation, you see, essentially there are two forces in the nature which gets used as the energy. One is the heat and the other is the light. These are the two basic forces. So whenever anything happens, whether you generate electricity or something, most of what we have been doing so far until some time back was to use the heat part of it. The heat is embedded in the coal, which is carbon basically. Heat is embedded in oil, gas, which is mostly hydrogen, and some carbon. So these are the essential elements which were used in different forms to generate power or electricity later. When we burn coal in the thermal plants or earlier in the steam engines, basically the carbon in that is, when it combusted or when it is burned, produces energy, and that energy is used to make steam. That steam is used to run turbines combined with dynamo that produces electricity, and that electricity is what we use. The structure of the industry which has got created over last 200 years especially is arising out of this basic transformation process or the generation process. Most of us don't realize that only 200 years back, at the time in 1800 AD, there was virtually 90% of the energy was generated by the biomass, and only about 10 to 12% of energy was generated by the coal. There was no oil, there was no gas, there was no other means of generating energy. The humanity was living on the energy generated by biomass. Then coal came, and the coal came as a wonderful source of energy, highly concentrated, and the world just took on. We started generating steam in steam engines, we started generating power, and in its heydays, the coal practically produced something close to 50 to 55% of the world's energy. That was the role the coal played, and everybody felt and got that you have a wonderful source of energy, and which can be used in different forms and to serve the humanity's need. Only about 100 years back, we got the oil. Its oil story is not very long. Today it seems to be so indispensable for us. It seems to be so necessary and essential part of our existence that we can't think of a world without oil, because if there is no oil, there is no motor car, there is no aeroplanes, there are no ships today. So the world moves on practically the oil as the energy. Oil was better because it has more hydrogen than carbon, and it's more efficient fuel, and that is where it has taken over. And only about 2 or 3 years back, in 2015, the energy contributed by the oil and gas was something close to about 45% of the total global energy. And the coal started receding. Today, coal contributes about 27% of global energy, and the two, oil and gas, contributes practically about 50% or so. So that is the transformation which is taking place. The renewables are more recent. Renewables uses the solar panels, use the light part of the energy and convert that into the electricity for direct use. It's growing. It's only about 8 or 7% of the global energy mix currently, but it's now catching on. So what we have created over last 100 to 100 years is this energy. There was one very negative aspect of this energy which we have created. Whenever we burn carbon, roughly about 3 times in terms of weight, carbon dioxide is produced. And carbon dioxide is our sort of heat trapper. We can control the temperatures in any room today by air conditioning or heating. This has the effect of virtually raising the temperature of the entire earth. And that, as we find the heat uncomfortable, this becomes an uncomfortable piece of thing of our existence. And we have accumulated so much of carbon dioxide now that we have a global problem, that the earth is heating up. It has these greenhouses have created that kind of impact, and unless we arrest that, there is a chance that the habitation on earth will become much more difficult for the human beings. There is another negative aspect of it, which is basically the pollution. So whenever you burn coal, we have a lot of ash coming. Roughly about 1/3 of the coal in India, when it's burnt, produces ash. And what do you do with that ash? There is also sulfur, which gets into the sulfur oxide. There is also nitrogen, which gets into the nitrogen oxides and all. And those also make our life little uncomfortable. So essentially, now, if we talk about what we are to transform, this is what we have in the energy scene. We have enormous amount of energy being generated, lot of electricity being generated, which has made our lives better, which has made us do everything. We can move better, we can connect better, we can go consume energy. In fact, it's said that much of the growth in humans in their brain power and body weight has come because the energy produced more food, energy produced better way of living, and made human life much better, which is reflected in our higher average age of life today. Even compared to anything like 40, 50 years back, we can hope to live 15 to 20 years more. Healthy way of life has increased. There is much less morbidity. There is mortality has come down, and now we are in fact witnessing much of what we aging society. Much of the OECD countries and Japan and others have gone into this age society where people are living much, much longer, and that is the kind of advantage. But we also have the huge carbon overload in the world. We have also huge pollution overload. It's no honor to say that 7 of the 10 most polluted cities in the world are in India right now. But this is changeable. London, many of you would have seen, or many movies and all. In 1952, London had virtually become a gas chamber. It had acid rains. And there are, in one of the worst episodes of life, about 3,000 to 4,000 people died in one episode when these kind of acid rains virtually choked people into death. China also had the bad days. 10 or 20, 15 years back, 7 or 8 out of the 10 most polluted cities in China of the global were in China, but they have cleaned up now. There is not even a single city which is in the top 10 list. It's our time. So I think this is one transformation which we will need to get it right. How do we generate electricity more using the renewables, less using the coal, less using the gas relatively, and whatever we do in that space, we do it in a manner where we use the new. And there are a lot of things which are coming up. Renewables is one very good story. It is estimated that all the global power which is needed by humanity in 1 year, equivalent power is what comes in the form of sun rays in 1 hour. That is the kind of resource which the sunlight is. in 1 hour what we can get, if we can convert, that is the, if we can convert that into electrical power, that is equivalent to meet the entire humanity's need for 1 year. So that is the kind of resource which we have. Now our ability to convert that into electricity and use it is what is the transformation of today and next 20, 25, 30 years would be. Renewables technology, the solar, wind have improved substantially. Some years back we used to get only 16-17% of the sunlight which falls on the panel converted into electricity. Today we can do about 25% or something. It will improve further. It has one sort of characteristic: you can't store this electricity into anything in the electrical form itself. You can do it in the chemical forms or otherwise. Night is, sun is not there, you still need power and electricity at the night. So do we, so in times to come, the storage is going to be one of the most transformative form of how this industry transforms itself. The storage, there are many options now being discussed, developed by the scientists and engineers. You of course have chemical options in the form of batteries and otherwise different kind of combinations are being tried to store. There are also other modes where some countries have done a lot more work, is to use hydrogen as the way to store energy. And it's possible, it can become very much economically viable also. If we use the electricity, generate the electricity from sun, and I said this is a very inexhaustible and very large resource, to produce hydrogen by using electrolysis and other methods, and then using that hydrogen to produce again the electricity needed either by way of fuel cells or other methods, and then use it for automobiles or for that matter even using the electricity in our homes and industries and all. So this is the big transformation which is going on in this energy space. Can we be part of it? I am quite convinced that this is going to be the case. 25 years from now, if we can do some crystal gazing kind of situation, one can see the coal dwindling further. I wouldn't be too much surprised if the share of coal goes down to less than 10% globally in the energy mix in that transition. Oil and gas will also come down. Renewables might cross 25% and between 25 to 40%. If that is what the transformation we can achieve, we can not only solve the problem of electricity and power for people, but we can also resolve the issues of carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases, as well as pollution. So this is one transformation which I thought I would talk. Let me come now to the second transformation, which is basically the industry structure. Electricity at the time of independence was generated in very small measures and was largely in the private hands. There were no government utilities at that time. We got the Electricity Boards Act sometime in 57, 58 or 59, which virtually nationalized and made the entire industry vertically integrated, and almost everywhere except some small exceptions in Mumbai, Ahmedabad, etc. In the government hands. That did a lot of expansion, taking the electricity to people, especially in cities and all, but that did not take the electricity to everyone. We ran a program, Sobhagya, in last 2-3 years to bring the electricity to as many as 25 or 28 million people, households. Of the 25 crore households which we have, more than 12 to 13% households did not have electricity, and that was done through the Saubhagya program. So that made some successes but did not fully succeed, and therefore around mid-90s, globally also, because that industry structure which we had in India until 80s was also practically the global structure. Most of the electricity grids in the world was organized in that fashion. So in 90s the reforms started globally, in India also. We started also sort of unbundling our utilities. Generation was privatized to some extent. The private entities started coming in thermal, in renewables, and lot of private sector entities now have come up. In fact, in last 5 years, roughly about 60 to 70% of the capacity addition in generation has come in the private sector. So generation has moved quite a lot. Renewable powers almost entirely, 90% or 85% is getting generated in the country now in the private sector. The transmission was the next one. Transmission nationally was organized literally as one monopoly organization, Power Grid. In the state also, we created transmission utilities almost in every state, and those are also in the state hands. About some years back, 6-7 years back, we started introducing private sector in the transmission space also. The Electricity Act was amended, tariff policy was brought in, and now you have an arrangement which is called TBCB, tariff-based competitive bidding, in which not only the private sector can participate, but Power Grid also can participate, state utilities can also participate, and we have seen good results coming in the transmission space. We have got 2 or 3 very strong entities now in the transmission space, and increasingly, if we look at now annual capacity addition in the transmission space, private sector has got something like 35%. So that's growing, and policy preference of the government is also which is encapsulated in the act and the policy, tariff policy itself, is that you award it. And this has brought efficiency of the private sector. The bid prices are lower than what the regulated returns would have given, and also the execution time is much less than what would have otherwise. So I think this space is going through that transition as well. The real crux of the problem, the final sort of frontier, so to say, is the distribution. And much of the problem of the power sector is concentrated over there. There is a broad basic equation. In the power sector, we generate about 5 lakh crore kind of costs or value addition, so to say, every year. But we don't collect more than 3.5 lakh crore. The states subsidize 80,000-90,000 crores, and then there are losses of 50,000-60,000 crores. That is the broad equation. And this is the fundamental reason why there is sort of crisis in the power sector also, why people are not paid, why they accumulated arrears, why every time in 10 years or so you have to come up with a new scheme. Uday came, earlier many other schemes came. So all of these basically are rooted in this one place where we don't collect as much as we add value in the power sector, and those losses are somewhere which sometimes figure in the form of unpaid bills of the generators, sometimes they figure in NPAs of the banks, and so that is the last frontier which has to be resolved. There are now, there is a realization that you can't simply use this old sort of ways in which we structured Uday or other schemes these may not prove to be very effective, and therefore possibly time has come to think of more drastic reforms in the distribution space. There is a thinking that in the distribution, the wire business you get separated and the supply business you get separate, except at the last mile where connections and all those things are coming up. You have to meter everything, you have to collect the dues in a manner which, in a way, if you look at it, the electricity business world over is cash business. The incidence of unpaid bills is very rare. It's only in our country where we see unpaid bill. In a parallel industry, if you look at it, the mobiles or the telecom, there is no problem of cash collection. Everybody pays and everybody gets collected. In fact, a lot of mobile payments are prepaid. You pay first and then consume the service. In electricity, this can be done, and therefore now there is this big proposal that all the 25 crore electricity connection should be metered electronically in the form of smart meters with facility of prepay payments. So whenever the company will not trust the consumer to pay in the postpaid mode, can be asked to prepay. You buy your electricity right, so to say, in the form of prepaid deposit, and use as much. That is what is available. So these are the kind of reforms which we'll have to look in now. That transformation is there. And if at the distribution end, I think this is at least my personal opinion, that this transformation of metering everyone, paying everyone pays and all bills are paid, everyone collects for their dues, etc., will probably not come in the state utility sector. We'll have to get the private sector here in the distribution supply space in much big way. And if that can happen, and that transformation would, to my mind, make the electricity sector completely different than what it is today. It will generate profits. It will also lead to enormous expansion, because as we see in times to come, the preference of people is to consume the energy in the form of electricity, whether it's in the form of electrical cars. Once they become competitive, it's easier, better, less noisy, less polluting to drive electrical car than an ICE based car. You can use the electricity in any form you want, in the form of heat, cook, whatever, and therefore in times to come, the electricity would be the most dominant form of the use of energy. And that, to my mind, will make the demand for the electricity grow. So if we can get this reform right of transforming the distribution space also in the private sector, and like for telecom and other companies you collect, I can see the demand for electricity growing at much higher rates than what it is. Today, electricity grows at about 5 to 6% per annum. I think it should be legitimate to expect the electricity demand to grow in the country at about in 2 digits, more than 10% definitely. So that is where I come to my last part of the address. If the people in the room, the electrical and electronics industry can become a big part of the energy transformation, which I said, storage, hydrogen conversion, get into those space, those would also require different kind of electrical equipments. Those would require different ways of handling electricity, which is what is your industry all about. I would wish that you are much more aggressively into this. You lead this transformation, and we don't depend entirely on what happens in the foreign countries. And secondly, if it together can transform the distribution part into a largely private sector dominated activity, I think we will see enormous rise in demand, and that is what will also drive our growth. And that dream of $10 trillion economy and $5 trillion economy can ride on very well the big growth in the electricity segment. I wish this happens. I think we can happen. Let us all work together. Thank you very much.